There was a time when poison looked beautiful. It shimmered, it sparkled, it glowed in the dark, and the girls who wore it on their skin had no idea it was killing them. In the early 1900s, radium was sold as a miracle, a scientific wonder, a modern marvel, a glowing symbol of the future. People put it in medicine, in face creams, in health tonics, even in products meant to make the body stronger, healthier, more alive. But inside a handful of factories in America, radium was doing something else. It was slipping into the bodies of young women, quietly, repeatedly, irreversibly. At first, the job looked like a dream. Young women were hired to paint glowing numbers onto watch dials, tiny, delicate work that seemed almost elegant. The pay was better than many other jobs available to women at the time. The factories were modern, the product was fashionable, and the substance they worked with seemed magical. At the end of the day, some of the girls would walk out of the factory with glowing dust on their dresses, in their hair, on their hands. At night, they shined. Some of them laughed about it. Some used the paint on their fingernails. Some brushed it onto their teeth. Some painted it across their faces before going out dancing. Imagine that image for a moment. A dance hall in the dark, music playing, young women laughing, glowing under the lights, glowing in the dark. And not one of them knows that inside their bodies, something has already begun. This is the story of the Radium Girls, and it is one of the most haunting, beautiful, and horrifying tragedies of the modern age. The story begins in the 1910s and 1920s in factories like those run by the United States Radium Corporation in Orange, New Jersey. At the time, radium had captured the world's imagination. It had been discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie, and to the public, it seemed almost otherworldly. It glowed. It gave off energy. It seemed alive. And because the dangers of radiation were still poorly understood outside scientific circles, companies rushed to market radium as a luxury, a medicine, even a source of vitality. The future, people thought, was glowing. And so the girls were hired. Young, bright, often working-class women with steady hands and careful eyes, chosen to paint tiny luminous numbers onto watch dials with extreme precision. But there was a problem. To paint those tiny numbers properly, the brush tip had to stay razor sharp. So the women were taught a technique. 3 simple words: lip, dip, paint. They put the brush between their lips to shape the tip. Then they dipped it into radium paint. Then they painted the dial. Lip, dip, paint. Over and over, again and again, day after day, week after week, month after month. Every time they touched the brush to their lips, they swallowed a little more radium. And they were told it was safe. That is the part that makes this story so infuriating. They weren't reckless. They weren't warned and ignored it. They were taught to do this by supervisors, by employers, by people who either did not care enough to know the truth or cared more about profits than the women doing the work. And so the poison entered them in the smallest doses imaginable. Not enough to terrify, not enough to shock, just enough to accumulate inside their blood, inside their tissue, inside their bones. Then came the first signs. Small at first. A toothache, a little fatigue, a strange pain in the jaw, a weakness that wouldn't go away, Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed danger. But then the symptoms grew worse, and worse, and worse. Teeth began to loosen. Then they fell out. The gums became swollen and infected. Abscesses formed. The pain became constant. Some of the women's jaws began to decay so severely that surgeons had to remove parts of the bone. In some cases, the bone was so damaged that it could crumble under pressure. Think about how horrifying that is. A young woman walks into a dentist's office with a tooth problem, and what the doctor finds is not infection in the ordinary sense. It is a jaw that is dying from the inside. Because radium behaves like calcium, once inside the body, it is absorbed into the bones, and once it settles there, it keeps emitting radiation, hour after hour, day after day, year after year. The body becomes its own source of destruction. The poison is no longer on the skin, it is no longer on the brush, it is no longer in the paint jar. Now, it is in the skeleton, and it does not stop. Many of the women developed anemia. Others suffered fractures, bone death, and cancers. Some became too weak to walk. Some lived in unbearable pain. Some died horrifyingly young. And still, the truth was resisted, not by nature, not by chance, by companies, by institutions, by people who understood that admitting the truth would cost money, reputation, and power. As the number of sick women grew, so did the fear. They went to doctors, to dentists, to specialists, and what they received too often was not help, but doubt. Some doctors simply did not understand what radium was doing. Others misdiagnosed the women entirely. And in one of the cruelest twists of the whole story, some company-connected experts tried to blame their symptoms on something else entirely: syphilis. That accusation mattered. At that time, for a young woman, such a claim could destroy her name, her dignity, her standing in the world. So now imagine the full cruelty of it. They had been poisoned by their work. Their faces were changing, their bones were breaking, their mouths were rotting. And instead of being protected, they were blamed. Instead of being believed, they were shamed. That is not just tragedy. That is betrayal. But some of the women refused to disappear quietly. One of the most important among them was Grace Fryer. She had once been one of the dial painters. Now she was becoming something else, a witness, and eventually a fighter. By the time Grace sought legal help, she had already been suffering for years. Her health was deteriorating. Her body had been permanently damaged. And yet, even finding a lawyer willing to challenge a powerful company was incredibly difficult. Think about the odds. A sick factory worker, a giant corporation, complicated science, little money, and time running out. But Grace Fryer did not give up. Neither did the other women who joined her. Together, they brought a case against the United States Radium Corporation. And that is where this story changes. Because up until then, these women had been treated like they were invisible. But now, they were forcing the world to look at them, to listen, to reckon with what had been done. The image that emerged in public was unforgettable. Young women, some of them physically shattered, some too weak to stand for long, fighting a legal battle against a corporation that had grown rich from the very substance destroying their bodies. The courtroom became more than a legal space. It became a moral stage. On one side, money, influence, delay. On the other, women running out of time. And time mattered, because radium did not wait for legal arguments. It kept burning through them. silently, patiently, without mercy. Some of the women died before justice could fully reach them. That may be one of the hardest parts of the story. They were right. They told the truth. They fought back. And still, some of them would not live long enough to see what their fight would change. In 1928, the women in New Jersey reached a settlement. It did not save them. It did not restore the bone. It did not erase the pain. It did not give them back the years that had been stolen. But it mattered, because it cracked the lie open, and once the lie was open, the world could no longer pretend not to see. The Radium Girls changed history. Their suffering helped expose the deadly cost of careless industry and corporate denial. Their legal fight helped shape the future of workplace protections. Their case became part of a much larger realization that a job can kill slowly, invisibly, and long before society is willing to admit it. And perhaps that is what makes this story feel so modern, because at its heart, this is not only a story about radium. It is a story about what happens when profit moves faster than ethics, when innovation arrives before responsibility, when workers are treated as replaceable, when young women are told that danger is beauty, that silence is professionalism, that obedience is part of the job. And then there is the detail no one forgets. For a while, they glowed. That image is almost too haunting to be real. Girls walking home at night with faintly luminous dresses, hair dusted with radioactive powder, skin carrying a ghostly shine. It sounds like something from a dream or a fairy tale. But it was evidence. The glow was proof that the poison was everywhere, on them, in them, becoming them. And that is why the story endures, because it contains one of the most chilling contradictions in history. Something that looked magical was murderous. Something sold as progress became a slow execution. Something that made these women shine was the very thing that destroyed them. The Radium Girls were not only victims of radiation, they were victims of deception, of greed, of denial. And the light that covered them in life has become something else in history. A warning. A warning that not all brilliance is safe. Not all innovation is humane, and not all progress deserves to be trusted. Because sometimes the thing glowing in the dark is the thing that will kill you.